Fly fishing is where patience meets purpose. Every cast, a quiet conversation with the river. Today's guest has turned those quiet conversations into a full-time calling. We're going to talk about how he left the corporate grind at JP Morgan to build a full-time gig in Utah, an outfitting service where he focuses not just on catching fish, but learning the details to make a difference. From the tailwaters of the Provo to the hidden high country creeks, our guest is going to walk us through small minor adjustments that can make big differences on the stream. This is the Wet Fly Swing Podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species we all love. Mike O'Brien is here, and he is here to take us into Utah, fishing the Provo River. We're going to talk about streamer bites during a pre-spawn. We're going to get into blue-winged olive hatches, how to lighten up your rig in the spring, and why most guides in the Rockies still keep one rod rigged with the technique we're going to talk about today. It's a good one. And it's called the bounce rig. We're going to find out why winter trout need slower drifts and lighter shots, and how a subtle check instead of a hard set can keep things buttoned up during your fishing. All right, let's get into it. Here he is. Lots of good stuff today. Mike O'Brien. You can find him at flyfishwithmeutah.com or on Instagram. Here we go. How's it going, Mike?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, really excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be great. I think, you're in a place, Utah, which is, kind of, I feel like it's right in that hot spot area, right? We've done a ton of stuff up north in Idaho. There's Wyoming. There's all these western states. And, of course, you got some big players out in Utah, Fly Fish Food and all the gang and all that stuff. So I feel like, to me, it's a hot spot, but maybe is a little bit off the radar, for some people. And I want to talk about that.
I think it's a little overlooked.
Yeah, it's overlooked.
Yeah, it's funny. When people think about fly fishing in the Rockies, Colorado, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming often pop up, but Utah hasn't been on the radar for a little while, and I don't know why. We're really, one of the big benefits to Utah is the proximity to the airport and fishing. So whereas, and not to knock any other state, but I know within 40 minutes of touching down at Salt Lake Airport, you can have boots in the water and getting lines wet, which is tough to say about some of my neighboring states, right?
Yeah.
And up until, I was just told earlier this year, up until about 5 years ago, more people came to Utah to fly fish than to ski.
Oh, wow. No kidding. So fly fishing is actually bigger than skiing.
It used to be.
It used to be.
Yeah. Now there are so many, the billions of dollars getting put into the ski industry have eclipsed that. However, the opportunities here, we really do have world-class trout rivers and streams. And it often gets overlooked for the quality of experience, the accessibility, and then all the other nice things that you're able to do, fun things that you can do, if you bring your spouse or family, which a lot to do, and they can be really entertained versus, if you go out to other spots, it can be pretty remote and your options can be quite limited.
I think that today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the opportunities in Utah. We're going to get into some fishing. We're going to talk about your home harbor because you're a guide out there and you've got some good stuff going. I haven't spent as much time in Utah as some of the other western states, so I think it's going to be cool to get that update today. But before we get into all that, I want to talk about your guiding, your program. Take us back because we like to hear the story of the founder. What's your first memory of fly fishing? Like, how'd you get into it?
So my uncle got me fishing when I was 7-8 years old. And when I was in my late teens, like 17, 18, I got into fly fishing on the John Day in Oregon.
Oh, really? John Day?
Yeah. I grew up in Oregon and would spend my summers out here in Utah and Wyoming as a kid and doing, the family road trip thing. And catching just heaps of bass on the John Day is how I started. And then that converted to, all the coastal rivers for sea run, cutthroat, and steelhead, and trout, and all that stuff. And then some still water, but I prefer moving water over still water. And then life got busy and I fell back in love with fly fishing in my 30s. And so I've been a full-time guide now for 8 years. I've had my outfitter now for 6. And the reason I started my own outfitter instead of working for others is I really try and focus on the experience versus, just getting people a fish or into fish. And so the level of experience I think that I offer is a little different out here.
So basically, started in Oregon, John Day fishing for, and what was the species there? Was that you got some of that bass?
Hundreds a day. It's just on little float tubes back then and just hanging out and having fun.
Yeah, just going for it. And what got you out again to Utah?
So I used to be in financial services, and I took a promotion transfer out here with JP Morgan. And then I came out here and that job actually dissolved. The offer went away. And so I transferred over to E-Trade. And then after a series of events, big life changes, I got out of financial services entirely and met a gal, and she said, what do you want to do? Being in my 40s, I was like, what do you mean? What do I want to do? I want to fish and hunt full time. What do I want to do? What does anyone want to do? And she said, well, maybe you should be a guide if you love, fishing so much. And so I started guiding. And it's funny, I talk with a lot of friends who are guides, and, they think, oh, guiding's so hard and it's so stressful. But for me, like, every day is just, it's so fun.
You did. I was just gonna say that's a good gal. Yeah, you should stick with her.
Yeah, especially it doesn't matter if the weather's absolute garbage. I still get to fish, right, and teach people about my passion. And in my free time I fish not just here in Utah but all over. And in fact, my wife said, "Oh, so I married that gal who said, what do you want to do? You should be a guide." I married her and she's so supportive. She's wonderful and absolutely amazing. So every trip we take typically includes fishing, always includes fishing, actually. And she said, every trip we take doesn't have to include fishing. I said, you're right. Well, sometimes we hunt too. It's okay. But honestly, there's nothing I would rather do.
Yeah, you're talking bird hunting. Is that what you're?
Yeah, especially fly fish. Hunting season is not nearly as long. In Utah, I can fish every day of the year. I do a lot of bird hunting, some big game. And last year, I had a big trip down to Africa where I hunted, but I also caught trout in Dahlstrom, South Africa, which was unbelievable.
South Africa.
Yeah.
You catching, what were the species in South Africa?
So those were rainbow and brown trout that they plant up there, but it's in these highlands that are just beautiful. They're not obviously not native. They're not naturally reproducing, but it was still, I still caught trout in South Africa.
That's the thing about the fly fishing has gotten so cool, is that it's become this world, and you name the spot anywhere in the world, any country, any little stream, it doesn't matter how big or small the fish is, you can catch something. You know what I mean? That's what it's kind of grown to.
Almost anywhere.
Right? Where it used to be just this trout fishing, that's it. That's all you had. And now it's like everything. Cichlids. We did an episode in Texas.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're a straight up purist, that's not for you. But I was already there and I was like, can we go to Dahlstrom? And my guide was like, absolutely, let's go fish. So took a day up there. It was magical.
So that's it. So you've got the good gal there. She gave you good advice to stick with it. So, and you could just tell, that's the thing about the guiding. I remember because I did some guiding and it was always a struggle for me. I didn't enjoy it that much because it was the pressure, but there's always these people you meet that are just meant for it, and you seem like one of those guys that you just love it.
I do. And I tell people too, you can't beat the views of my office. The Wasatch Mountains are 95% of the time what we're looking at when we're fishing, and they're spectacular. The view never gets old.
So with your program, maybe let's take us back a little bit there. So what are you covering? What's your main river when people are fishing? Are you covering, just part of Utah? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I'm in kind of in central Utah. we mainly fish the Provo River. If you book a half day or a full day walk and wait or a float, vast majority of the time going to be on the Provo River. Could also be the Weber River, but that's what we do most of the time is the Provo. And if the Weber's fishing really well, then we might go up to the Weber River, which is closer to Salt Lake. If you're staying in like Park City, though, it's about 6s. The Provo River is a blue ribbon fishery. It's spectacular. It's world class. And the fish are aggressive and fight hard, and we get to fish it year round. It's really fun.
So the Provo is the river. When people call, if they want to go to Utah, that's probably the place that you're going to take them. So is the Provo, now describe that a little bit. Is that a tailwater? Is that a freestone? What is that?
So there's 3 sections of the Provo, the upper, the middle, and the lower. The upper is a freestone. Both the middle and the lower are tailwaters. The middle Provo is probably the most fished stretch of water in the state. And it is, it has a lot of fish. They're a little smaller, but it has a great green drake hatch. They're very open to hit and dries. I fish the middle a fair amount, but where I really like to fish is the lower Provo. The fish count is over 6,000 per mile. They are in the upper and high teens for length, and they are aggressive and fun. That's where we do our floats, which is, from April through September. That's probably 85% of what we do, our float trips. And as a normal float trip where you're just casting from, a hard side drift boat for, all day. The Provo River is a little smaller, so we are in rafts. I run a fly craft, and so we hop in and out and use that platform to move from run to run and then fish in between. So you kind of I tell people, you get the best of both worlds. You get the walk and wait experience without all the effort. And then if you've got a kid with you or a wife who's like, I want to take a little break. Great. Sit back and, crack open a beverage and enjoy the view, right? It's spectacular. And so that's where I spend the majority of my time is on the Provo. We're really opening up to our remote streams and rivers trips, which is a full day. And that includes a little bit more driving, but the odds of you seeing other people when you're fly fishing are really low, and getting into different species too. The Provo holds rainbows and brown trout, but in the last week and a half or 2, I fished with clients and we've caught cutthroat and brook trout and a couple tigers. So there's a lot of different opportunities. If we're in the summer or late spring, early fall, we can go up in really high elevation creeks and the headwaters of several rivers and chase a lot of different aggressive, smaller fish, but super fun. Or we can go out to places where last week, as an example, we landed a few 22, 23-inch browns. And so it's just, there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of different things that we can do depending on the client's ability and timeline.
Right. Gotcha. And those areas, so you've got the Provo, you said the lower Provo, the middle, and so you have some other streams you're going to other than the Provo that are in, another basin.
Yeah. So hotspot those, obviously, right? But
yeah, we don't want to spot burn anything, but I just want to verify that you have some other secret spots where you can go other than the Provo.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well as like there are a couple small stillwater places, little reservoirs and lakes where we can get into just crazy fishing. So depending on the timeline, right? Depending on the month, we can really have a lot of fun going remote and chasing some fun fish. And it really makes it, a little bit of variety for a guide is fun, but for the client too,
Definitely add some species to the list. So you mentioned the month. Let's just take it now as we're talking. We're kind of in the October, November's right around the corner period. Maybe let's start there. So are you guys, when is your program? So you mentioned through September. Are you do you cut things off and start hunting at some point? Or are you still guiding?
So I've got clients this weekend and next week. I fish year round and then I bird hunt when I'm not on the water and when I'm not, obligated with, family things. But it goes fishing first, and then I'll fill in with hunting. And some days I get to do a little cast and blast. So that's, just depends. But yeah, right now, mid-October into November, we're in pre-spawn. So these fish are starting to get a little randy and thinking about building reds. So it's great streamer season. We have a great bluewing hatch right now that's going off in the afternoons. A lot of dry eats. I even saw some October caddis and some PMDs even. A lot of midges still popping off. Now that things are cooling down and the water temp is dropping, insect life is really picking back up again. And so it makes it really fun. And the recruitment on the lower Provo especially is so high that we'll even fish when they're spawning. And we have been encouraged by our Department of Wildlife to take fish because there are so many in our river system on the Provo.
To kill brown trout?
Yeah, browns especially. Browns outnumber rainbows on the lower Provo probably 8 or 9 to 1. And on the middle, it's probably like 18, 19 to 1. Yeah, so especially on the middle Provo, that needs to occur more than it is because the size of the trout is being a little stunted because there's just so many of them.
So you could kill a couple and take them home to eat.
Yeah, in fact, I encourage it with clients. The law in Utah for the Provo is 2 under 15 inches, which is a great size for eating, right?
So 2 under 15, but nothing over 15.
Yes.
And that's because I guess that would be another whole conversation, but you would think if you're trying to reduce the numbers that you would probably want to take some of those, or what is the reasoning? Do you know why?
Yeah, so the reasoning is catching something in the 17 to 20 inch range, one at 17 to 20 is way more fun than 5 at 10. And those are the ones that are spawning and being, offering a better experience for the angler and providing a more of an experience. So it's the size class also in volume for population is so much higher in that smaller range, way higher. And so they're trying to cull that smaller range.
They're trying to balance.
Yeah, trying to balance it out.
Because this isn't something where they're like trying to wipe out all brown trout. They want to keep some browns because browns are good, but they want to try to balance a little bit to make it.
Exactly. There ought to be, obviously you can't have all trophy-sized fish. There have to be smaller fish that are coming up to replace. But right now, the small size population is out of control, especially on the middle Provo.
Well, that'd be an interesting conversation right there to bring somebody on to hear more of the background on that.
Yeah, and I'm not a biologist, right? But I go out there when they're doing the sampling of the fish, and typically that happens. Normally end of October when they're doing it. It happens every couple of years.
What's the big fish you're seeing?
So on the lower Provo, when we're zapping fish and sampling them, we've seen 20, 21, 22 inch rainbows and browns. And on the middle, we've also seen fish that size and a little bigger even.
So there's fish over 20 in the whole system.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And those are true trophies, right? If you're finding a 23 inch brown on the Provo River, that's an exceptional fish. I consider anything 18 plus as a trophy.
Exactly. Well, and that's the cool thing about it. I mean, size is all relative to the basin. If you're on a blue line stream, you might have a 6-inch trout is a trophy fish, right?
Yeah. Yeah. In the Appalachians, man, you're stoked if you hit 8. And it's all a matter of scale, right? But it's, you're not getting sea run size fish.
No, these fish are growing. And this is and to get back to that. So is the Provo, does it have a lake? Is it a tailwater?
So it is fed from what we call the Uinta Mountains, UINTA. And it's one of the few mountain ranges in the U.S. that actually runs east to west instead of north to south. And so from that basin, it feeds the upper Provo, which then, several other streams join it and feed into the Jordanelle Reservoir. And from Jordanelle to Deer Creek Reservoir is the middle Provo, and that's in the Heber Valley, and it's beautiful. A couple of weeks ago, saw a few moose as we're fishing.
No kidding.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And as a heads up, so nobody gets like scared when they book with me, I always carry a sidearm, like on my chest, because moose
are dangerous.
Yeah.
Or can be. Not. I mean, the chance of you getting mauled by a moose are like almost zero probably, but it could happen.
Yes, but you can never underestimate, people's lack of awareness. And then to a large degree, their stupidity, right? People just kind of think, oh, wow, look at that, a moose. And then they start moving towards it, hackles up, ears back, like, hey, man, read the room, right? So they're most dangerous when it's a cow with calves or a cow with a calf.
Yeah, same with bears, right? Yeah.
Yeah, same with bears, sow with her cubs. And I haven't had interactions where I've had to pull, but we've come close more than a few times, because the calves are curious and they're like, hey, what's going on? And they'll walk right up to you. And that's when you want to have a guide who knows what's going on.
I mean, always being prepared is better than not being ready for it. So that's interesting too, because I didn't realize that the moose are going down, further south. And that you guys, I mean, you're not way south, obviously. You're up in the northern part of. I mean, that's the thing about Utah, right? It's a big state. If you go down, like, you can get down into more of the. I mean, I guess do you consider where you're at the kind of the high desert or mountain, or what is the area? It's not the desert, right?
Yeah. So I live in a valley that is, I would consider it high desert. Man, Utah is the second driest state in the U.S. for precip. Like, only Nevada has less rain than we do.
Oh, yeah. So you are a dry state, right?
Yeah. So we're really dry. But the mountains, depending on elevation, can get a lot of snow, quite a bit of rain, their own
weather pattern in the, yeah.
Yeah. I've been in the mountains at 10,000 feet in August fishing, and all of a sudden we get 3 inches of snow. It can get crazy. You just have to be prepared.
So that kind of sets the scene a little bit on Utah. We'll kind of bump around here a little bit, but let's take it to, I think, we're talking October, November. This episode, I think, is going to go out December, January, somewhere in the winter. So let's talk about that. How are your tactics if you just take it to, let's say, a January? So you do book trips in the winter?
Yeah. So it's funny. I am more busy when the snow is bad because people book trips to ski. And then if the skiing's great, a lot of my return clients don't give me a call, and I'll hear like a couple weeks later, hey, we were just in Utah, had a blast, and the snow was too good, so we didn't call you. Right. But if the snow is bad, I get a lot of calls, and fishing in the winter here on these tailwaters can be really good. Great midge hatches, most every day. And, if you're bundling up for skiing, you can easily fish. Now might be a good time to let you know, like, one of the things that sets me apart as an outfitter is I use like Orvis Pro waders, nice Sims waders. Like, I'm not using like inexpensive or lower quality, cheaper gear. So as long as you can bundle for weather, like, my gear isn't going to fail on you.
Yeah. Oh, so you're saying you have gear for if somebody's coming in, they don't have their own gear, you could hook that up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's included with the trip.
Yeah. So somebody's coming in for, say, whatever it is, a business in the Utah, because that happens a lot. We were talking to Raphael, one of our members in the community. He was, I think, traveling over to, Cleveland. And he heard Jeff Liskey on the podcast. And he's like, all right, I'll check it in. And he went up and just got a day with Jeff, and it was on a business trip. But you probably get some of that too.
I get a lot of it. I get a lot of, in order to keep things good, really good high end, I kind of cap my corporate trips or larger group trips and try to keep it to 10 to 12 max. But we include waders and boots, right? Everyone should know you bring your own hat and sunglasses and dress for the weather. But, I do hand warmers in the winter, always have water, etc. But we provide all of that. And then the guides have their own rods and everything. So you can literally show up in a polo and khakis and go for it, and then head right back into meetings if you want. I have clients doing that all the time.
Well, so let's start on that. Let's think of it as a winter. So if we were coming in there, somebody's coming in, they got a business meeting, they're going to hop out for you on a trip. What is talk about that winter fishing typical? What's your rig setup look like? What are you fishing there, like flies and stuff?
So typically that's going to be for winter. It'll be midgy. It'll be really midgy. And we're using bounce rigs typically as well. And so I would throw on any number, like a Miracle Midge or a Bling Midge or something like that. And maybe also a little glow bug on the bottom, just depending. A lot of times those hit great in the winter. Caddis, like a caddis booger or a caddis pupa, something like that too, does really well. The feeding window, obviously in the wintertime, is much shorter. And so typically those trips start around 11 o'clock, 11 to noon. And obviously we have much less sun, right? So we're not going to start at 8 a.m. and absolutely freeze, but 11, sometime between that 11 and 3 o'clock window is a good 30 to 90 minutes where those trout are going to feed, where the insect activity is moving sufficient for the juice to be worth the squeeze, right? Where they're going to be able to add calories instead of diminish calories by chasing food. So it's much lighter, slower presentation. Typically we're on, 5 or 6X tippet. But it's the thing I love about fall and winter fishing is there's so few people out. It's quiet. It's beautiful.
Yeah. There's snow on the bank a lot of times.
Yeah, a lot of times there's snow on the bank. Not this winter so much, but the last 2 winters before, there was significant snow. We had 2 record-setting years. So we were like post-holing 3-4 feet to get to the river to fish. And because they're tailwaters, they never freeze over, right? But yeah, depending on the snow, it can be an adventure just getting to the river sometimes.
So in the wintertime, you're going to narrow that window. It's going to be, a few hours in the middle of the day. And then you talk about, and what is the bounce rig?
So a bounce rig is indicator fishing with 2 or 3 flies with some split shot on the bottom.
Oh yeah, on the bottom, right?
Yeah. So if you're a bass guy, it's kind of like a drop shot rig, except you're moving it through the river. And so what ends up happening is the indicator acts as the sail and it's pulling the rig through the water, and the weights act as the drag and the ballast to slow it down. And what I tell people is, you can always see the current on the top of the water. And as we know, that's the fastest of the moving water in the river. And you want it to be like 20-25% slower than that surface current to be more consistent with the current that's on the bottom of the river. And when you can match that, that's more the speed of what the food is looking like moving downriver. That's when you get strikes. You could have everything perfect. If you don't have the right speed, those fish are going to steer clear, right? They're not going to eat it for love nor money. And so, yeah, that's where it becomes very technical, and the smallest change in weight or even length of line can make all the difference between lights out catching, 12 to 20 fish in a day versus getting 1 or 2, right? So it's really understanding kind of the intricacies of that setup to really produce.
Yep. And you balance that on depth and all that. What is the typical, are you fishing more kind of riffle type water? Is it pools? Are you mixing? What would be the perfect for that bounce rig?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the wintertime, typically it will be on a tail out leading into a deep pool and through the deeper pools, because those fish, with the water being so cold, their metabolism is slower, their movement is slower, and they're pretty lethargic. And so they're not going to be in the fast riffles that are shallow and highly oxygenated, because that's too much effort and energy to expend when there's not enough insect life to feed them.
They're hanging in the deep stuff where it doesn't take any energy or very little, and they're just sitting down there, and you're dropping them off the tail out. They're right in their feeding lane. It's like right in front of them, and they got and is the flies. So you got this weight on the bottom. What would be a typical weight? I guess it depends on how deep the pool is, but what's a typical?
So it depends on the depth of the pool. So if let me think. Most of the time I'm using either double, like BB shot or B shot. So zero point 0.4 grams or 0.2 grams. Right now I'm on 0.2. I'm using B shot. And sometimes I even go smaller. And 2 to 4 on the 0.2s is typically what I'm doing. In this, when we have more water flow, we switch to BB, and sometimes even much like AB shot plus, just depending on how deep we need it to get and how slow we need it to go.
Because you want to get that, so you get it down, and when it's down, how do you know when it's down? Is it just kind of bouncing along the bottom, or how?
Yeah, so we call it a bounce rig because that indicator, instead of bouncing, I call it's ticking, right? And so what you're seeing off the bottom on the top of the water with your indicator is how those weights are moving over the rocks and debris on the bottom of the river. So if you have it ticking, then the likelihood of you getting a strike is higher, right? If the indicator is just moving along with the flow of the water and the bubbles, you're not going to get anything because it's moving too fast. It's moving at the surface current rather than the subsurface current.
So that's how you know when you feel it ticking, so you know you're down the bottom.
Well, so you need slack from the tip of the rod to the indicator. You need a couple inches of slack. So it's not like uronymphing where it's tight line, right? So what you're doing is you're allowing for a little bit of slack because you want that indicator to just drift dead, like with zero input from you. And then I tell clients, the 3 indicators typically that you're going to see for a strike, that indicator is either going to stop, it's going to drop under the surface, or it's going to hit, right? So if it stops, drops, or hits, we give it a bump. We give it a check.
What's the check? Just with a rod tip?
Yeah, so I call it a check versus a set because I have too many clients from the East Coast, striper fishermen and the like, bass guys. If you yell set, they're ripping that rod and they're sending that fish airborne or snapping it off when we're on light line. So a check is just moving that indicator a few inches.
Just a little bit. You're just kind of popping it up.
Yeah, but it's always down river.
So you're setting, or not setting, but you're
into their mouth. Yeah, you're setting the hook into their mouth. If you pull it up, a lot of times you're pulling it right out of their beak. And we never set upriver, Dave. Never.
Yeah, always down to the fish. So you're setting in the corner of the mouth of the fish.
You're welcome to set upriver with other guides, but you're going to hear about it from me.
Yeah, no. No, good. Yeah, that's what we want. We want to hear, that's the cool thing about this is that, we're learning, right? We want to learn on this trip and take it home.
Yeah. And I've been told the bounce rig was like innovated and pioneered on the Provo River. That could be, I've heard from old timers that is the case, but I will tell you in the Rocky Mountains, if you hit moving water and you tie up a good bounce rig, it's almost unfair.
Yeah, because you're down, because you're out there, and you got multiple flies. Talk about that. How many flies would you typically have on it?
So depending on the time of year and what the bugs are doing, I'll do 2 to 3. 3 is the legal limit in Utah. Some surrounding states only allow for 2, but because they allow for treble hooks, that's got 3. So fly fishermen got the green light for running 3 flies. And so what I typically do, like if there were a blue wing olive hatch going, right, I might run 3 flies on like 4X, maybe even 3X, depending on the flows of the river, because early spring, those fish are fired up and hungry. But I'll do like a pupa on the bottom, like an emerger or like a good no, I'm sorry, a nymph on the bottom, a pupa in the middle, and then an emerger on top. So you're hitting three different heights in the water column at three different stages. And a lot of times what happens is you'll get the nymph and the pupa hit on the top 80% of that drift. And then as it swings, right, at the end of your drift, as that emerger lifts up and the weights go from being behind upriver from the indicator to downriver, right, it gives that little bit of a lift and pause. And that's where that emerger will absolutely just get annihilated. And it's exhilarating.
What is your, how are you tying, what's your dropper look like when you're tying these on?
So I tie triple surgeons loop and use the tags. I will always do a triple surgeons unless I'm on 3X, and then I'll just do a double loop instead of the triple because it binds too much.
And then how far above that weight are you putting your fly?
So again, that depends on time of year. That could be like 4 or 5 inches, or it could be like a good foot. And then I will typically run between flies 6 to 12 inches normally, maybe with about 8 inches being the happy medium is kind of the standard. And it's always fluorocarbon for the bounce rig.
Fluoro for everything?
No, just for the bounce rig, for anything subsurface. So if we're running a hopper dropper in the summer on a float trip, right, that hopper is going to be all mono because it floats and stretches. But the fluoro, because it neutrally sinks, right, and doesn't stretch, that's always going to be fluoro to that sunken line.
And will your 3X and all that, your main line leader be fluoro too?
Above the indicator is mono, and everything below the indicator that gets in the water is fluoro.
And what is the typical indicator you're using?
So I really like the is it the airlocks?
Oh, airlocks, yeah.
I have, I don't know, probably 300 thingamabobbers that I just go through those too quick. The Oreos, they're okay. They're not my favorite. I really like the airlocks, especially because I'm able to adjust up and down my leader, the depth. So from my indicator, the knot that connects my leader to my fluoro line, I have a micro swivel because that line always kind of is moving and twisting, and then I don't get binding up and twisting in my fly line. But I'm able to adjust the depth, especially if we go from one hole that's rather shallow to one that's a little deeper. Instead of changing out the whole rig or splicing in a couple feet, I can just slide my indicator up and get that to swing down and give me some extra depth there. So it's really versatile. It's fun.
So that's definitely one killer technique. Now that is good. We were talking wintertime, but does that work throughout the year? Are you using that for nymphing?
Yeah, man, I will tell you, like, if you look at 95% of guides year round, at least one rod's going to be set up for a bounce rig. Always. I'll say in September, we might do a little bit of, or August. Sometimes an inline rig works really well. But clients have to understand what the flies are doing underwater to be able to understand how that strike looks different. A bounce rig hook set and strike, I mean, most of the time that indicator is ripping and bouncing hard. The hits are pretty noticeable. Wintertime, more subtle, but most of the time they're aggressive takes. So you've got to be asleep not to notice.
No kidding. And then what's the inline?
So an inline is where you go from indicator down to a fly, all again with fluoro. And then I like to go eye to eye with a second fly. And normally my first fly is weighted and my second fly is unweighted. So I'll use like a Euro fly, like a jig fly, typically to the first fly. And then my second one will be like no weight that just is able to really kind of feather in the water column and move more naturally. And that can be also really effective, especially on the swing, on that bottom third of that drift where that second fly kind of lifts. You know, it triggers that trout's FOMO, which is trout have FOMO more than any person I've ever met. You know, they can't stand something getting away.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned the emerger. So what would be that good fly at towards the tail out of the that you'd be using? I guess depends on the hatch.
It depends on the hatch. A lot of times I'll use like a CDC dry fly as my emerger because it'll trap bubbles and air and want to float, but because of that first fly being weighted, it can't until it starts to lift up. For my, let's say, blueing olives like April and May, I use a lot of like the Slim Shady and a lot of flies from Hopper One Rodriguez. His bluing patterns are just sick, and I prefer them unweighted so that they can rise, and that really triggers those trout in that mid to higher column, right? As things are lifting up, man, and you see fish flashing all the time when they're actively feeding. Sometimes they're on the bottom of the river, and sometimes they're like 10 inches under the surface, and that's where you're really able to target them, like with an inline rig, and kind of get that to, once you stop the drift, that bottom fly starts to lift up because the current's pulling it. And so against that tension, you get some fun takes.
Yeah, awesome. It's basically like more of your, indicator down to a fly, your typical, and then and off of the hook, or not off of the hook, off of the eye. And why do you do that? Why the eye versus off of the shank?
Because I've converted over to, like, in freshwater, I don't have any barbed hooks anymore. So if I tie a line onto a barbless hook, man, it's a lot of times I'll lose that section, right? And I've learned, as long as people keep tension with trout, we're typically not going to lose the trout, because unless he just straight up beats us, right? Breaks us off or beats us. But if you're doing your job, we're not losing the fish because we don't have a barb. And then when the fish gets landed, if they pop the hook, I don't want to catch it in my hands, right? I don't want clients and pop the line. I don't want them to catch a barbed hook in the face or in the hand. It's so much easier for me. And it doesn't mess up the faces of these fish.
Those are the two biggest things, right? It's the fact that it's better for the fish, and it's better for us if we get hooked. I was doing that with my kids because I had them out in the stream here this last month, and I kept, there's sometimes that, I might have some flies in their barb, maybe I forget about, but I was really on it. I was like, all right, I'm going to make sure this barb is totally pinched down, because I want to make sure if my kid catches it in the face, I'm not going to be out there with a pair of pliers having to rip it out of her. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've had guys, like, I've heard it hit their sunglasses and then anchor into their cheek, right? I've had gals, who have like nice hair, like it's all tied up and everything, and that hook gets hit right in the part of their scalp, and it's barbed deep.
Oh, have you done that with a barbed? And you've done it? Yeah. And what's the bar? I've seen that before. How in those situations, how did you get that thing out, or what would you do?
So the best way to do it is putting pressure down on the hook eye and looping around the hook bend with other line. And as you push down, you pop that, and it pops right out. And that works for like big hooks. Like if you're offshore, like it works for everything. You just have to have someone not moving, right? That whatever it's stuck in has to be like stable, and you have to get a good pop in order to pop it loose.
Yeah. And you do it on the numbers, right? You go, all right, we're going to do it on 3. Ready? 1, 2, and you pop it before you get to 3, so they're not ready for it.
Oh, you never go to 3, right? Because they tense up, and a lot of times I'll just do it on 1 pop, and they're like, oh, because that's when they're most relaxed.
Yeah, right. That's so, for me, that is so cringe. That's one of those things that just gets me like, man, I've never, actually that trick I just learned more recently. And I think in the past, you know what I mean? So I think in the past, but yeah, that's a good one. So for anybody that's listening, 100%, you should learn that trick. Or actually just use barbless hooks and you'll be fine.
Yeah, barbless hooks. The other place that's horrible is the webbing in between the fingers. That happens a ton because a lot of times these hooks are small. It's not uncommon for us to be 18 to 22. A good chunk of my flies are in that smaller range, sometimes 24s, though I don't like tying those. But those small hooks, man, I mean, sticky, sharp, enclosed, it's no big deal, right? But in fingers and faces, that's where it really,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, that's where it really hurts.
Well, there's our little segment on our safety segment today. So, but yeah, so we're talking, we're going to take it out of here in a little bit, but we're talking, we're kind of focusing on winter, which is good. As you get into the summer, are you going to depends on the situation. Are you doing more nymphing, less nymphing? If the hatch is going, are you really switching to dries?
That's a great question. So I will say April and May is some of my favorite time to dry fly on the Provo, because those fish, the water's coming up a little bit in temp. We're getting some runoff. So the water's moving heavier. We can walk and wade. And the second half of April, we're always able to float. But I see more noses on that blue wing hatch on the lower Provo than for any other hatch, really. It's incredible. And so I had a gal this spring who she told me she'd hooked a fish once with a fly rod, but so really no experience. And subsurface nymphs weren't working at all.
So that's the thing. So nymphs don't always work. It's not like you can just say, hey, I'm going to always catch something on nymph. They might not be working for whatever reason.
They may not be looking at it. And I was throwing everything I could. And finally, after seeing so many noses, I said, okay, we're switching. We're going dry flies. And she landed 10 big trout over 16, 17 inches, all on dries on a half day walk and wade, which for someone who has never
pretty new.
Yeah. To hit. I mean, it was absolute magic.
Yeah. Like a blue winged olive dry size, 16, 18?
16, 18. And I'll tell you, my favorite new blue wing olive dry fly is the Antonio's blue wing olive. That CDC with loon loxa as the floatant is a 1-2 punch that was absolutely irresistible. And the beautiful thing is it's got a high vis tag right in between the wings. So even if there's a bunch of blue wings out there, you can spot that fluoro orange or pink. I tie them typically in orange. They're super easy to spot, and the trout just hammer them because they sit so low.
I feel like the more we do this talk, the expert guides like yourself, I always go back to the Catskills dries, right? Because you got this big traditional dry fly sitting on the surface. It's perfect. It's beautiful. But I feel like trout sometimes with dries especially like it a little more down for whatever reason, right? In the surface. And that CDC really does a good job, right? Because it floats, but it captures bubbles.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Lance Egan at, Fly Fish Food, a friend of mine, who's been on your podcast a bunch, right?
Yeah, Lance has been awesome. Yeah.
His caddis that he has, that corn-fed caddis is, dude, it's so lethal.
It's such a great name too.
Yeah, and it's a great buoyant fly with a little bit of loxa in there. Man, that thing will go all day long. And the thing is too, because it sits on the water, not above it, right, with a bunch of hackles spun, it puts, I think, a better footprint on the water, and it gets more bugginess in the film, which is where those bugs get trapped, right? And that movement and everything, and it just is so irresistible that, man, they can't help themselves. So I'm a big fan of CDC dry flies because they do sit low. And most of the dry flies that I spin with hackle, right, I'm cutting off the bottom of there. I want that hook point to be subsurface and sitting on top.
Yeah, you want it
in and on. Yeah.
Right, and then you can still see, like you said, the tag or whatever. It's still obviously there. There's no question.
Yeah, none of us are getting younger, right? So now I'm tying more like little hot spots on dries, and it's making a huge difference for visibility with clients, right? That fluoro orange with like EP fibers or whatever it is are just And it doesn't take a lot, but so good.
Well, this is awesome, Mike. I think what we're gonna have to do is bring you back on and dig deeper into some of these, because I have some other questions about your top tens and all this stuff. But let's take it out of here with our Wet Fly Swing Pro segment. This is our members community. We just had a call here last night, and I want to give a shout out to John Jacks, we've been talking for a while, and finally had a chance to chat on Zoom with him. He was asking, and so Mike was on there too, Mike Willis as well, and they were asking about, they love a couple of segments we do. One of them is like resources, and I'm not sure if you have some good resources over the years, like when you first got into it, but are there any books or, videos? How did you, did you teach yourself? Like, how'd you get in when you kind of got going on this?
For tying, is that what you're talking about?
Or really anything. Could be anything around fly fishing, yeah.
So when I started, obviously prior to YouTube or anything like that, it was books and friends. And so the first flies I tied were woolly buggers, right? Beadhead woolly buggers. And then the first book I bought was from Charles Jardine, who I've actually gotten to fish with. And he's such a gentleman and so cool.
Yeah, he's in the UK, right?
Yeah, man. He's like the Lefty Cray of...
Yeah, he's the Lefty Cray. In fact, that's what they call him, right? The Lefty Cray of the UK.
And he's so fun and so great. And yeah, Lance actually hooked me up with him because I got to go to London a few years ago with my wife. And so I got to fish with Charlie for a couple days, and it was so fun. But I bought his book years ago for tying. And what you need is just a few simple techniques. And once you understand a few basic techniques, you can begin to piece that together. I'll tell you now, if it's not your number one search for tying and for strategies, it probably ought to be. And that's Fly Fish Food. The content that Cheech and Lance and all those guys put out is so outstanding for trout that, it is right down the street from me, and I am in there a lot. And so I clearly have a little bit of bias, but I've been to fly shops all over, and you can't find a better fly tying inventory in the world.
That's what you hear about. I mean, Fly Fish, those guys are so awesome. And I've heard, because we've been doing some stuff up north at the shop they took over, Jimmy's, they took Jimmy's shop, which was already known as a fly tying shop, right? It had tons of materials, and they doubled it or did even more. So these guys are they're like the fly tying. I mean, I feel like for me too, because I grew up around a fly shop, and I feel like we always were, the fly tying was what made us, that was a big part of what we are, because there's some shops that don't have a lot of fly tying out there, right? They don't have a lot of materials and stuff, and that's fine. It's just a different shop.
And everything they do, they buy those preset flies, which can work, but in fisheries with a lot of pressure, sometimes a touch of a variation, a little bit of a darker or a lighter or less dressing can make all the difference between a good day and an absolutely just epic, unforgettable day. And that's the thing that they bring really to the table, is that expertise of, combined decades upon decades of experience. And yeah, they're awesome. So I send people there all the time. They're great. Never had clients say, "Oh, I had a bad experience there." They're awesome. So YouTube has got to be a number one resource. There's so many tying videos and strategies and tips and tricks and casting and the whole shebang. You can get, if you want to go down rabbit holes, man.
Yeah, YouTube is I've been talking a little about that, because I'm more in the audio only, most of the podcasts we've done it's audio only, but yeah, you get on that YouTube, and YouTube's so good at knowing what you want, and you'll be watching, all of a sudden this thing will pop up on the right, some video about whatever, some random topic, and you'll be like, man, that's exactly, and then you're on this rabbit hole for an hour.
How did they know? Yeah. And then 4 hours later, you're like, oh, I forgot to eat.
Exactly. But I guess if you do that with fly fishing and fly tying, it's fine. It's okay to go down rabbit holes, right? That's not a waste of time. Cool. Well, I think, Mike, again, I think we got a good episode for number 2 coming, because I want to dig deeper into this. I want to talk dry flies. I want to go in, but I think we'll leave it here for today. Before we get out of here, my one random question for you. You've got some dogs around there, and I haven't done a lot of bird hunting in recent years, but talk about that. Is that your other big passion for, other than fly fishing?
So I spend between 270 to 300 days a year outside. And if I don't have a rod in my hand, I'm typically with my dogs. I have two, they're called Deutsch Longhaars. They're a German long hair pointer. So they have the same drive and energy in the field that a short hair does, but they have a much better off switch and a double coat. And so they handle the cold much better. They love the water. I can take them fishing with me sometimes, but a lot of times they they can't get the birdiness out of them. And so as I'm bringing the fish in, they'll jump in and they'll bring it to hand for me. And they're like, here you go. And I'm like, oh, thanks. And then when I let them go, my girl especially has dived down into the like bottom of a pool to try and get the fish back because she's like, what are you doing? We take these. Yeah. So they're super birdie. They love the water.
She literally will go underwater and she'll dive down into a pool.
Yeah, she'll dive down and I'll see all the fish scatter. And I'm like, okay, it's time to go to another hole, right?
So they're not on all your guide trip.
They're on very few guide trips because they're highly intelligent, highly driven, and they don't like being on the sidelines. They need to be in the action.
And is that the cool thing about the bird hunting is that you're so tied to your dogs and what is that like when you get that dog and it's on, I guess, point? Are they pointing? Is that kind of what they're doing?
Yeah, so they'll point, flush, and retrieve. They don't just do birds. They're one of the versatile hunting breeds of Europe. So they also do rabbits, and that's super fun. They can track scent for big game retrieval. But when they're working a field, having them kind of crisscrossing and picking up scent and then going on point is it's magical to watch, man. It's so fun. And for them, it's like fulfilling their entire life's purpose. And so they just like when I put them in and they see me grab shotguns, they start shaking and their teeth chatter and they can barely contain themselves because they get so amped up and they're just, it's a joy to watch them work, right? Even if I don't shoot a bird, like for them to like cover fields and cover brush and work is incredible. One quick story about my girl Adele, who's now 5.5. When she was 8 months old, I took her out for grouse, thinking, okay, we might find one or two, no big deal. She actually pointed on a bunch of birds. I shot 2, and she retrieved 4. Like she'd get so close to them and just couldn't handle it, and then just pop and grab them and bring them back. And I'm like, great job. But when I saw the DNR guy, he was like, hey, what's going on? How'd you do today? I was like, hey man, I got a problem. Limit's 3. I have 4, but I'll take a ticket. And I'll especially take a ticket if you can find shot 2 of these birds. And so he's, lifting up, kind of running his thumbs through the feathers. And he's like, well, this one has one, this one has one. And then he's like, these 2 don't have shot. I'm like, I know, dude, she took them like before I could get her on lead and before I knew what was going on. So they're super birdie and fun. And I think that's her, like, just super, just can't stop, won't stop.
Oh yeah. They're at the top. These dogs are like top of the game. Like,
yeah. But also it's probably a lack in my ability of training, right?
Right. Training too.
So it's the first time I've trained them myself. I haven't had pro trained bird dogs before. But the connection there is so great. And when they're listening and moving and, if I drop a bird and I point like with my hand out, they'll look and they'll hit that direction for me. And it's magic, man. It's so fun.
That's awesome. I know there's a number of people that are into that, so I'm sure, they're going to be listening and maybe we'll have some pointers. And I definitely, but that's something, the cast and blast, right?
Yeah.
You're not guiding for hunting right now, but that's something you do on your personal time. You can kind of get a cast and blast in.
Yeah. I'm a licensed outfitter, so I can, in the state, I can take people out and set them up. I'm not a licensed hunting guide is what I should say.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. Well, this is awesome, Mike. I think we'll just leave it there and send everybody out to flyfishwithmeutah.com. And if they want to connect with you, that's same on social media. And yeah, thanks today for all the time. This has been great. I love getting these intro episodes in, and we'll be digging into something else on the next one. And yeah, looking forward to staying in touch.
That was great fun, Dave. Thanks. I'm excited. Have a great day.
There we go. Like we said, you can connect with Mike right now. Go to flyfishwithmeutah.com if you're heading to Utah or have any interest in checking out the area. Definitely a great resource. We're excited to check in with Mike again on that next episode. If you're interested, the best way to get in on trips as well with us is go to wetflyswing.com/pro. And we are likely heading down to this part of the world. So if you want to check in on trips, send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com as well. Either of those places will get you access to our inner community, and you can connect with more anglers and get more good stuff going this year. That's all I have for you today. I appreciate everything you're doing for us and all the listens. If you get a chance, please share this out to someone you know and love who needs some extra tips on fishing the Provo and especially fishing with nymphs. We got into that very highly today. And I hope you have a great afternoon, great morning, or great evening, or wherever you are in the world. And look forward to talking with you on that next episode. We'll see you then.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.